Hi, everyone. I'm Governor John Carney, and I'm here with my wife, Tracy, and we'd like to welcome you to the 2021 Compassionate Champion Award Celebration event. Thank you all for joining us as we recognize the exceptional efforts of all our award winners. This group of individuals and organizations have all helped drive Delaware toward becoming a trauma-informed state. And in response to the many challenges of 2020 and the COVID-19 pandemic, Delawareans showed incredible resolve and compassion as they faced new trauma every day.
We know that compassion and trauma-informed approaches are essential, now more than ever, to bring communities toward connection and healing. It's been inspiring to see how organizations and individuals have answered the challenge of the past year plus to support and strengthen communities throughout Delaware. These leaders have shown the value of listening and being responsive, of true partnership, the kind of partnership that ensures that all of our neighbors are seen and heard.
Thank you to all the individuals and organizations who were nominated for this year's award. We applaud your commitment to making Delaware a stronger state through compassionate, trauma-informed care and services. Now we're honored to announce the winners of the third annual Compassionate Champion Awards. First, we'd like to congratulate Sarah Pyle Academy for winning this year's Compassionate Champion Award in the education category.
From the healthcare sector, Christiana Care, with special recognition to Dr. Stacy Boyer and Megan O'Hara. From the community organization category, we recognize the Children and Families First Trauma Response Team.
Congratulations to Erin Conley, a Victim Services Coordinator within the Department of Correction, for receiving this award in the government sector. And in the first responder category, we have the Newcastle County Police Hero Help Behavioral Health Unit.
We would also like to acknowledge some of our runners-up, since there were so many strong nominees. They are the Bancroft School, Evan G. Shortledge Academy, and Melissa Panacci of the Newark Police Department. Thank you all for your leadership.
Congratulations to all of our winners, and thank you everyone who submitted nominations this year. It's always a tough decision, but we encourage everyone to continue their incredible work in a trauma-informed approach. Thank you so very much.
My name is David Chen, and I'm a physician with Christiana Care Health System. It is my honor to speak in recognition of compassionate champions in Delaware. When we hear the word compassion, it can evoke many different feelings and thoughts. We think about a warm handshake, a kind word, a close hug. But what happens when these very ordinary and usual symbols are changed? What do we do when these memories are now marked, when the handshake brings to mind the sharp smell of sanitizer, when we must remember words muffled by a mask or digitally garbled by a frozen screen, when our most essential embraces were done through layers of plastic and fear. As a healthcare worker, there are certain things that I am trained, experienced, and familiar with. My work in the hospital is often oriented around organ systems and people who have reached their breaking point and then some. Sometimes there is progress and improvement, and these are the moments we strive for that bring deep satisfaction. There may be the stories we celebrate together and the big wins, small or large, that carry us on hard days. But sometimes there is no progress. Sometimes the news is often or only bad, and we become caught in hard and painful moments that are filled with uncertainty, fear, anger, and sorrow. How do we carry ourselves and one another then? I was reminded of this recently by a patient who was struggling with shortness of breath and the many emotions that come with it. I asked her, "Does it feel like you are drowning in air?" And there was a moment of immediate recognition. I shared about my own experiences with lung disease and the unique fear that comes from breathlessness, and she simply said, "You understand because you've been there." The word compassion itself is rooted in the Latin words pati and cum, which, when put together, literally mean to suffer with. Those who have trained and worked hard in serving people in education, public safety, government, community organizations, and healthcare have understood and lived this reality long before COVID ever became a household word. While there are triumphs and overcomings that we work to celebrate together, there are traumas and griefs that we must still bear witness to daily, both great and small. And it deserves recognition that the trauma-informed approaches and care honored here are often built on a foundation that may have taken years to establish. But what has been different about the past year is not that we suffer, or even that we suffer together, but that the crisis was brought suddenly, at the same time, to all of us, all at once. We have had to change and change and change again. We've had to see new and terrible things that we had never seen before, to see old and terrible things remade in horrific ways, to rethink and reshape the ordinary and usual ways we have served and coped, and we have often done so feeling alone, tired, afraid, breathless. Not all of us may feel this way, nor do we all feel the weight of it all the time. We have not all experienced the same things or in the same ways as those we work with, those we serve, those we love, and those we lean on. The compassion we share is neither perfect nor simple. But today we recognize those who have been exceptional in doing so, both by understanding and being there in the lives of others and in transforming the systems and structures around them to do the same. Though it is easy to think of 2021 as the year of moving on, of leaving troubling things behind us, we take this moment to recognize how easily we have taken breathing for granted and the work ahead in recognizing those who are still drowning in air. Thank you for all the work you have done and still continue to do.
TIC is meeting each student at, well, each student, each teacher, each parent, each person of our school community at their need level, and being really mindful and aware of the reality that everyone has some degree of trauma that they've experienced. Recognizing that trauma does not always lead to mental health or physical health challenges. And although we acknowledge that fact, knowing that especially in times like today, everybody's in the middle of this global pandemic, we're all experiencing some level of trauma. We truly believe that for our students to have lifelong success, they need to have a comprehensive toolkit that's deeply rooted in self-care and awareness about themselves, like knowing what makes them tick, how much water they drink or how much sleep they get, how that relates to their mood, their productivity, their anxiety, their agitation. And that's really important for us to have our students realize in order to be successful lifelong. So the diploma is great, but if you're not happy or know how to mitigate and work on with your trauma or just work on anxiety or what makes you happy, we don't feel like we're preparing you for life after school. And that I think most importantly for our SPA Inspires community, is that it's a whole school approach. It's not just me. Every member of our SPA team plays such an important part of moving this forward. And it's not just me. Even our cafeteria manager, Miss Carey, and I say even, and I don't mean that, but she is such an important part of our program in that she has so many relationships with our students and is our students' trusted adult. And so we go to Miss Carey like, oh, have you heard from such and such or such and such? And we involve her in our CSAT process, which is our comprehensive student assistance program where anybody can refer, including our custodial staff, our nursing staff, our cafeteria staff, if they're noticing any issues from our students dealing with trauma, if they know that there is something that happened in the community, or whether it's attendance, or whether they know anything that's going on that would be an obstacle for our students moving forward. And that's really kind of cool to see how that has evolved. Our ability to mitigate the effects of trauma is really a powerful responsibility, and we don't take it lightly, and I don't take it lightly. The fact that we can ultimately provide an environment that gives us the ability to be aware, the knowledge, to align resources for students that are experiencing mental health challenges, and to help facilitate healing and recovery. Well, that's just the ultimate, the goal, like in an experience. I think about my own personal kids and know what I want for them. And the ability that we have is something that we just can't take for granted. It has just ridiculously increased our ability and our awareness of our great responsibility. And, when you feel like you just don't have enough in you, it just fills your cup.
People think trauma-informed care is kind of this big, huge thing, and it doesn't need to be. At the end, it can be. There's so many things that we can do, interventions that we can do, and we can get very creative. But at its roots, it's sort of this very simple concept of, I want to know you, and I want to understand so that I can best help you. And I also value my own well-being. My work has always been pretty exclusively trauma-focused, but never before have I had the experience of being a professional who is actively experiencing what we can call collective trauma, or something that is changing the very fabric of our society, while also providing care for others who are being actively traumatized.
Most of my population is working with the perinatal population, anyone who's pregnant, postpartum, up to a year, and anything that might intersect with that, whether it's somebody with fertility challenges, or if they've experienced a pregnancy loss or stillbirth or neonatal loss. This year has been really, really tough on new parents. And so I have mothers whose toxic stress involve things like separation from their babies, if they've either contracted COVID or they're separated from older siblings, their older children because of COVID. And so a lot of times we also see the strict policies that went around for social distancing, and has resulted in a lot of home isolation. And so again, no access to supportive relationships that they normally would have going through this major life event.
Using a trauma lens, you can really get to the root of suffering. And I think that that's where you affect change. So, and I also think that that's where you connect more deeply with one another to affect change.
When you shift the conversation from what's wrong with you to what happened to you, it definitely decreases shame and guilt, and starts shifting that mindset of, hey, maybe something isn't inherently wrong with me. And so I think that helps tremendously with rapport building in terms of my role as a therapist.
One of my most distinguished trauma colleagues, Rich Lowenstein, always says people are not carburetors. We can't simply be fixed. We're complex, and we need to be understood, and we need to feel safe enough to engage in care We need to have a voice and choices in our care. We need to connect with those who understand our own experiences, and we need all of our experiences to be understood in the context of our unique identity dimensions, our culture, our ethnicity, our race, our gender, socioeconomic status, and so forth.
The trauma response team, it was born out of a commitment to staff from the agency based on trauma-informed practices to really garnish support for staff around traumatic situations, for example, the death of a client or community violence. And the TRT would provide immediate support, debriefing, and offer some longer term resources as needed to help programs and staff feel like that the agency had kind of wrapped around them.
It's really about just providing this safe and confidential, and we like to say, brave space to share our thoughts, our concerns, our feelings, and just natural reactions to things that are potentially traumatizing to all of the staff or any individual staff at Children and Families First.
When COVID hit, the trauma response team had to really adapt to the needs, both, externally with our clients, but also very much internally, and how it was impacting all of us. And it was widespread, and everybody was impacted. So the trauma response team started to think about how to structurally put in support mechanisms to help staff. And so we started to meet twice monthly in virtual rooms, which was all a huge learning curve for us. And based it on topics such as, challenges working at home, things like that.
The trauma response team became a lifeline, a sounding board, a safe space to allow people to grieve, to share their uncertainty, to share their concerns about how that span of 12 months that we did not see coming gave them opportunity to process and to do that in a safe way among people that they know and that would accept any answers or anything that they'd like to share.
For the first time, at least in my career, and probably many of my colleagues, there was an experience of trauma that was collective and pervasive, and not just something that our clients and families were going through, but that each one of us was going through. So we had this disruption to our sense of routine, to just experiencing anxiety. We lost our sense of connection, right? And that connection and that sense of safety are at the core of trauma-informed principles. So having this opportunity to feel connected and supported and heard and acknowledged in these virtual spaces that we scheduled was so important.
Trauma does not necessarily have to be death in the family or a worldwide event or community violence on a large scale. It can also be the loss of stability when a child is going through a divorce with their family. It could mean a sickness, a separation, things like that, where a child is not able to see their friends and family, or a parent significantly is not able to spend time with the rest of their family, things like that, or the loss of like a family member through not necessarily death, but just separation in general.
For me, having that lens has really just allowed me to be more compassionate, more empathetic, and respond more appropriately, more with more care to both myself and the clients and my colleagues. So it's really for the betterment, not just of the people that you serve, but the agency itself and your own improvement.
Trauma does impact us all, and it impacts us in different ways, and that's okay. Trauma-informed care acknowledges that most people have experienced some sort of trauma throughout their life, and everyone experiences trauma in different ways. It might be the same situation, but we all are going to have a different reaction to it. The Victim Services Unit here at Department of Correction, we provide information, and support to crime victims when the offender is in the care or custody of Department of Correction or under probation supervision. I think that the victim services here at Department of Correction have worked hard to continue to provide the same services to crime victims that we were providing before COVID happened. It's also learning how to navigate the differences in the system and the impact that that can have on not only on the crime victims that we're serving, but on us ourselves as staff trying to navigate things. When leadership at your organization acknowledges trauma and trauma-informed care, I think it really does make an impact going down. And you know, it's not going to happen all of a sudden, but those little changes that you can make and the little impacts that you can see is you know, making a difference on your organization is really empowering and will keep you moving forward.
For us, trauma-informed care is an approach to interacting with people in the population that we work with that recognizes the prevalence of trauma in society, that recognizes the impact that trauma has on people's behaviors and health, and is really a model that changes the question we're trying to ask from what's wrong with this person to what has happened to this person. Because of the prevalence of trauma in society, any individual we interact with may have had their life impacted by trauma, so that every interaction, we should approach it in a trauma-sensitive way. The behavioral health unit itself is split into two separate teams. One is a substance use or addiction related team, and one is a mental health related team. And although we are one unit, we have somewhat different roles. Speaking for the mental health team, basically what we do is it's primarily a co-responder model. So we have Newcastle County police officers partnered up with a social worker, a mental health professional, who ride together and respond to incoming 911 calls for mental health related crises or issues. And then once we're out there, our role is to perform a mental health assessment in the field and determine what that individual needs as far as services in that moment to deal with the crisis. And that may be taking them to the emergency room, it may be taking them to a psychiatric facility, or it may be connecting them with outpatient treatment, calling mobile crisis, getting them involved. But basically that's what we're going to do, is trying to have that mental health professional and the officer respond together in order to respond to those calls and connect them to services. So overall, the goals of the unit are to reduce arrests and incarcerations for mental health related issues, to reduce emergency room admissions for mental health related issues, and to reduce 911 calls for mental health related issues by connecting people to services and resources that will help sustain them in the community and achieve long-term positive outcomes. But I think it's changed the way that we interact with people when we go out on calls, with that understanding that any individual we interact with may have been impacted by trauma, and that may be affecting their behaviors. It may not be about what's going on in that moment or necessarily their attitude towards us or towards law enforcement, but there's other things going on in their present or in their past that may be affecting them. Educating or training staff about trauma-informed care is a good and easy first step, but by itself is not that meaningful. I think really transitioning an organization to being trauma-sensitive and trauma-informed really means taking a look at long-standing policies and procedures and the way we interact with the population that we serve, and being willing to critically assess and examine those things and recognize areas that need change or could use improvement.
Everything we do is around being trauma informed and moving along that continuum. from the very beginning, when we transformed the school and became a 1 to 6 school, one of the first things we did was decide that we wanted to be a compassionate school. And when we made that decision, then every other decision around our instructional model and just our overall approach had to fit under the compassionate school or trauma-informed umbrella. It really changed our approach. It changed my personal approach to how I handled kids, how I handled children, how I handled my own ACEs, and how I was able to apply my upbringing to the students' upbringing, with whom I was working with. I started this work when I was the assistant principal at Bayard Middle School, and I attended the Red Clay Poverty and Trauma Conference, and that was in 2015, I think, 14 or 15, and it changed my life when I realized that the impact that trauma has on the brain and behavior. It answered every question I ever had about how I could better serve the students in the city of Wilmington.
Being in a high needs school in the city of Wilmington, we have a lot of staff that, or I shouldn't say, we have a staff that we know, right? We know why our students are struggling. We know the barriers that they face, and we've kind of always known, right? It was never really a secret that our students came with incarcerated parents, or they came from homelessness or households of abuse and neglect and alcohol disorders and so forth. So it was never a secret that these things existed. However, in 2017, when the trauma, initiative really came to us, we were introduced to the science side of it, right? So now we were seeing, trauma affects development. Okay, students are displaying these behaviors because they have been exposed to trauma. So we were really understanding now the link between trauma and their development, right? And trauma and their behavior, and trauma and learning. So we as a staff have really been able to then shift our focus on, what is wrong with you, to what happened to you, which has changed everything, right? Which is why we see a steady decrease in referrals each year, because our staff is really shifting their mindset on supporting students in a way that's effective.
I always look at it simply as meeting people where they are. Especially working for a police department, I'm working with people sometimes right as a traumatic incident has happened or right after. And so you never know what anyone's previous experiences have or haven't been. And so it's really just trying to build a rapport with someone so that they feel comfortable talking to you. I've been doing this work for a long time, for like 18 years about, and always in the criminal justice system. I've been with police for a while. I was at the prosecutor's office for the first, half of my career. And so I think, just seeing the change and I think being trauma-informed care really, especially when you're talking about it and you're doing training and you're talking to others about it and making sure that you and your colleagues are, it's giving you a perspective, but it's also giving you pause. You're taking that extra minute or two to kind of take a step back and just be open to whatever the person's going to say or need. So it really is working to empower the person, to not have judgment on how they are or are not handling or reacting to things, and just trying to have that perspective, because once again, it's not about what I would do or somebody else would do or how I would react or somebody else would react. It's how this person is, and building that rapport with them so that hopefully that you can, assist them to get what they need.
We want to thank you again for joining us in our virtual celebration of the 2021 Compassionate Champion Awards. Congratulations, and thank you to our Compassionate Champion Award winners.
In the past year, we've seen the impacts of trauma perhaps more clearly, more publicly than ever before. And thanks to our Compassionate Champion Award recipients and many others in our state, we've also seen the impact and promise of how we can support each other. We've seen that trauma and challenge are not destiny, that we have the tools to build a better future, and that together we can do just that.
So to our 2021 Compassionate Champion Award winners, thank you for all that you do for our fellow Delawareans. Take care and keep up the tremendous work, and may God bless you each and every one.